Should I be buying during COVID?
I'm buying properties with creative financing in place where I end up with very little money into the deal. I can walk away with nothing in the deal. I'm really attracted by that. And if you're buying long-term, 10 years from now, I still believe real estate's more valuable than it is today. Prices are going to fall until you can rent out your unit, or you're going to have a lot of vacancy waiting to get the price that you want. Past data isn't going to be as useful right now as it was previously. Uncertain times carry more risk. And with more risk, we need to have more reward. Run your numbers, be damn sure you're going to have cash flow. Be sure that if we go into a recession, have a 10% pullback. A bad tenant can make a property worth nothing.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with more Mike Rosehart. In today's video, myself and Mike, we discuss buying real estate during quarantine, COVID-19, and are we changing our approach when it comes to buying real estate? Again, 2020 has not been going according to plan, but are you just going to give up? Or are you going to figure out a way to continue to win? That's what we really discuss in today's video, because understand, regardless of whether you're in a bull or a bear market, there's still always opportunities to make money with real estate investing. It just may not be that you can use every strategy in every market during every market cycle, but you can certainly still make money with real estate. So in today's video, myself and Mike Rosehart, we explore how we're currently making our offers and where we see opportunities in regards to the real estate market in 2020.
Hey guys, Matt McKeever here. Really excited. We got Mike Rosehart back on the channel. Hey Mike, how's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me back on.
So I'm excited to talk about today's subject matter because I'm sure you're getting a lot of DMs too, but every single day I get DM, should I be buying during COVID? So I thought it'd be great to shoot a video on buying real estate during COVID. So you've bought a couple properties since COVID happened?
Yep. Yeah, I had one under contract already that I closed on. And I put 2 more under contract during this time. Not as aggressive as I was obviously before, but if the right deals pop up and it makes sense, I'm all over it.
So let me know, what did those deals look like? What was attractive to you about them? And yeah, let's start there.
So it's interesting because my journey's changed from, I used to be in a position where I was looking for properties that had certain cash flow metrics or certain BRRRR metrics. And now one of my greatest, or most interesting type of acquisition is one that in some way it's sort of just has to fit certain metrics for me. And my metrics aren't as much cash flow as they were before, but still, always cash flow. Like you have to at least have positive cash flow, right? And
so you're not buying for cash flow, you're buying for appreciation, Mike?
I'll put it this way. I'm buying properties with creative financing in place where I end up with very little money into the deal. And so that's what's most attractive right now is that I'm just growing my portfolio without putting a lot of my own capital down. So in deals where I can walk away with nothing in the deal, I'm really attracted by that. And so I'm less attracted by cash flow only because I have so much cash flow already that cash flow at my tax bracket isn't even that attractive to me. If I make a couple $100 a door, half it's the tax man anyway. Is $100 or $200 a month or whatever extra going to make a big deal to me? No. But acquiring another $700,000 asset that I know over 10 or 20 years will appreciate in a big way with none of my own money out of my own pocket is more attractive to me in this stage in my journey. And for me, it's about having fun, right? It's an ego thing at this point. Beyond I don't need fire anymore. I'm not trying to build a cash flow for that. I'm doing it to stay fresh in the game because I enjoy the thrill of the game. So yeah, I'm like a lion that's kind of full, but still likes to hunt. So I guess Don't use me for metrics. Obviously still buy for cash flow first. If you can buy a BRRRR, that's a second awesome thing. And then if you can get creative financing terms where you don't have to put any of your money up, that's a win too, I think.
So people immediately, when they hear creative financing, doing deals, not putting a lot of my own money, we're going to have a lot of people want to know what that deal looked like. Can you at least shed some light on the overall structure and, how you were able to find out if creative financing was an option and how you made that work?
Sometimes my favorite type of deal is one where it's with someone I know. So it's someone in the private network that's not an MLS, because we can be a bit more creative or flexible in how we do things, right? For instance, and I don't know if I don't want to break any rules, but you could do something where you could buy a property from someone that's, someone and then you have another property together, a partnership, and like you could structure your terms so that you had more cash flow on the property you just bought off their portfolio, and then say, hey, you can have all the cash flow from our joint venture partnership. And now we're in a position where I end up with almost no money into the deal, or there's lots of creative ways you can get super flexible with things like that. Like there's even sort of, they could pay for the renovations as an example. You can make a deal that that's one of the deals that I have is we're doing a BRRRR project, and it is a full BRRRR. And I'm like, look, you're going to pay for the renovation, so I don't have to have any money out, and I'm just going to refinance it after. And I'm going to end up with no money in the deal. And so that's something where like I have the relationship there, and we've developed that and cultivated it. And it's a win for them too, because we have other projects together where I'm sweetening the deal for them. And so it's one of those things where like you can create a win-win, and it's a win for them and it's a win for me. And so, yeah, I'm looking at those kinds of deals right now. I'm obviously more sensitive to price now than say, pre-COVID. And I think, well, actually my sort of, I guess, prediction is that if you're talking about like a real estate forecast, short term, I think things are going to heat up in a big way when this lockdown finally ends. There's a lot of pent up demand and a lot of people sitting on cash that are just afraid to make a decision during COVID. So I think there were deals during COVID that won't exist in June, July, August, but I think things will then slow down again in the fall when the ramifications of all this free money catch up with people, right? We know right now in Canada, unemployment insurance was paying 55% of your earnings if you're laid off. It's currently 75%. So, and then examples like the CERB and all the mortgage deferrals, all that's going to come to an end in the fall, assuming we don't have a second wave and depending how the government reacts to said wave. I'll take a sidebar quickly and just like touch on COVID-19. For those people who are following it, of course, it's a serious thing, but the new data that's emerging and the new studies that are emerging are now, and in fact, the CDC even pulling back estimates that they initially released around death rates, around who's affected when and where. And there was actually like there's been some credible media sources and credible studies that are now jumping out and saying, hey, if you're under age 40, as an example, your chance of dying is 0.006%. It's literally in line with the flu. So it isn't a thing that potentially is killing people that are the young folks who are running the economy right now. It's high risk for those people who are older. The average age of death for COVID in Alberta is 83. The average age of death in general is 82. So, I mean, something to think about when you look at the average age in Canada alone, the average age is over 65 for deaths for COVID. So we know that like the people who are dying from COVID are old. Fact. I'm not saying it's not a dangerous thing, but I think the media, they took and they ran with a few studies that were from medical professionals who have always erred on the side of caution and always overestimated just so that people will take action. So for instance, we knew that like the original study that they based the lockdown on was calling for, I think, like 500K deaths in the UK, over 1 million deaths in the US, et cetera, and so forth, at a much higher death rate. And so let's put that into context when we're looking at real estate, right? If this virus isn't killing near as many people as we thought, it isn't near as deadly, and a lot more people had it than we originally thought as well, that has implications to the long-term effects. Now, the economy's been affected, but when you're buying during COVID, you need to realize that I don't think, so my opinion is, the real reason I want to bring this up is that the second wave, I think we're not going to react in the same way. I don't think it makes sense for us to do a full lockdown again. And so I hear investors messaging me on Instagram saying, Mike, there's a second and third lockdown coming. And I'm like, well, let's look at the data that we have available. And like, that's all we can do is try to make assumptions based on the data we have. And the new data emerging is saying that someone like me, if I get COVID, it's not going to kill me. I mean, the flu might kill me too, but at a similar likelihood, right? And so there's no reason to force me and bar me from working as there was before, because the old data said, hey, there might be a 5 or 10% death rate. Some of the initial studies were really scary, right? And now with that new data that we actually have millions of cases we can look at and say, who's actually dying, what's actually happening with people getting infected by COVID-19. And so something to think about in your real estate investing strategy when you're, buying property. You have to be considerate of what is the overall economic climate. But at the same time, I was buying pre-COVID, right? And I was buying at a time when it was a big bull market, and we were seeing, jumps and leaps and bounds in prices, sometimes 1% a month, like crazy types of growth over the last 3 years in our market. And during that time, I knew I was buying in a boom. So what did I do? I was very conservative in what I was buying then as well, in the same way, right? I didn't know what the future held. I've been calling for a crash for a long time. We all have known that there should be a correction or some sort of, reining in, right? And so this is that time. And if you're buying long-term, 10 years from now, I still believe real estate's more valuable than it is today. 10 or 15 years from now, long-term, still bullish on real estate, residential real estate specifically, not so much commercial. So I think that's important when you're buying real estate is, does it cash flow for one? Are you cash flow positive? After you refinance it, after you've burned it, can you still be positive cash flow? If the answer is yes, then, and maybe do some sensitivity on that too, by the way, and maybe say, hey, look at the numbers and say, hey, what if I had a vacancy rate of 12% now? What if I had a bad debt expense of 15%? We know there's no evictions right now. We know that the tribunal's backed up for like a year. Tenants are getting away with not paying for several months. And so you might want to bake that into your plan and say, hey, if I had no rent coming in for 3 months, one, do I have an emergency fund large enough to cover $10,000 worth of expenses or whatever the expenses are for said property? And two, does it still cash flow if you have tenants that don't pay for 3 months? And I own investors that were buying property that was very close to no cash flow. And when they have a 10% bad debt expense, as in a tenant doesn't pay for like a month out of the year, 1 month's loss plus a month of vacancy, let's say, those two things together. And imagine you had turnover, you had to do some painting, boom, their cash flow is in the negative in a big way. And I think that what I see a lot in the community, people sending me messages in the real estate community in Southwestern Ontario, people aren't running their numbers as stringently as I would like. I think that a lot of people are like, oh, a 3% vacancy rate, oh, bad debt expense 5%. In reality, what we're seeing, in the trenches for those C-type properties, and by the way, they're running A-level analysis on C-type properties, and they're like expecting they're not going to have 2 months of turnover between tenants where the unit gets trashed once in a while. That's going to happen to you in a 5-year period. One of your units, that's going to happen. You're going to have 2 months where you have to renovate. It's going to be vacant. You might have, 6 months where you don't get paid. Factor all that in, and once you do, you'll see cash flows a little bit less than you might have thought. And so that's something to, I guess, consider when you're buying real estate. Is just because the old way of analyzing properties might not be the new way of analyzing properties, and I think we need to be more conservative.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Talking specifically about some of those metrics, are you able to either tell the audience what you believe is the right metric, or what metric are you using when you're running your numbers in regards to vacancy, bad debt, repairs and maintenance, things of that nature?
So it depends a lot situationally on the location of the property and the property itself. It's hard for me to use one spreadsheet. I adjust my spreadsheet based on where the property is and the condition of the property and the tenant profile.
They don't want to hear that, but
I know you want to hear like there's like
they just want the answer, Mike. Give them the silver bullet and they'll be happy.
Yeah, I don't have that, but for example, a D-class property with like terrible, ODSP drug addict type tenants that are just going to like not pay you rent or trash your unit, or it's already trashed. Factor in that there's going to be a time where you're going to have the unit vacant for several months to turn it around, each of the units probably. And the new tenant you put in there is not going to be a doctor, right? They're going to be like a working class person who might be affected by COVID and can't pay rent for 6 months, and it'll take you a year to evict them. Build that in, right, in a property like that, versus maybe an A-level property that's you're going to put on Airbnb. You're probably not going to have the same level of bad debt expense. You might have no bad debt expense or very, very little. You might have some chargebacks or something. But with Airbnb, you get paid by credit card, right? So if they damage the unit or they prepay for their trip, they can obviously cancel their booking, but you can just rebook it. So it depends on the strategy you're going to use in the property. A lot of people now are pivoting on the Airbnb space to monthly rentals. You saw Airbnb jump in and put the longer term stays. They're focusing on like month to month. So it's furnished rentals, but like 1 month stays at a time. And that's great because you can often get 150% of market value rent, and you get like almost a longer term tenant. And they'll often stay 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It's very attractive still in that sense for Airbnb. Maybe not so much on the short term, like one night stays, because you're not seeing that type of traveling that was happening before. And I think that'll come back. But when you're running your numbers, I wish I could give you say, hey, like this is the number you have to use, but it just varies so much. Like even a cap rate, people are like, what cap rate are you buying at, Mike? And I'm like, well, that's kind of a loaded question because it depends on where I'm buying in the city. If I'm buying in East London, I might expect like a 8 or 9 cap rate for myself. Or if I'm buying like right in like a prime location beside Western, I'm okay with like a 6 cap because I know that the property could sell for a 4.5, 5 cap to another investor because the location is so desirable and people pay a premium for that. And so there's so much more at play than just like saying, hey, in London, this is the cap rate, or in London, this is the vacancy rate. There's actually quite a bit of intricacies depending on the type of property. And like, as an example, a 1-bedroom unit tends to rent pretty quick, but I have 4-bedroom units that take forever to rent. And especially now during COVID, your vacancy rate might be 20%. I've had to drop rents considerably on some of those quirky, unique kind of like, I have a 6-bedroom student rental, and student rentals are like dead right now, right? There's Fanshaw's, I guess, international programs coming back in January. They've gone full online for September. So we know there's no students going in class pretty much at all, and none of the international students. So there's all those vacant rooms that are piled on the market in London. And so if you're buying, for instance, a student rental property, it's going to look totally different in your analysis than if you're buying a family rental property. And you have to factor in, hey, if there's several hundred or even a few thousand extra bedrooms on the market now that can't be filled because people have pieced out on their lease because they're like, hey, I'm not coming back in September, or because, you know, they're just, no one's coming. So those people who are going to do an 8-month rental in September, they're not here. Well, now you're going to have to, what do you think is going to happen when you have a few thousand extra landlord bedrooms available on the market? Prices are going to fall until you can rent out your unit, or you're going to have a lot of vacancy waiting to get the price that you want.
Do you want to get control of your financial life? Do you want to crush it in real estate with wholesaling? Do you want to join my full-time team of wholesalers like Mike or Shahir? Or what about Tyler or Diego? Or what about Amar? All right, and what do we do, boys?
We make offers, we buy fast, never gonna miss a deal cause we pay cash. Offers, 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 deals, deals, deals. Tell us, Mr. Seller, what price do you feel? Cause we're Southwestern's biggest source of deals. Boom!
So if you guys want to crush it with wholesaling, you need to join my team. And down below, video description, there's all the links you need.
People who are going to do an 8-month rental in September, they're not here. Well, now you're going to have to, what do you think is going to happen when you have a few thousand extra landlord bedrooms available on the market? Prices are going to fall until you can rent out your unit, or you're going to have a lot of vacancy waiting to get the price that you want. And so where you maybe expected 600 a bedroom, like, I think that rents are going to drop, and I'm seeing that actually. I'm seeing reductions on Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace where I could squeeze in someone for, you know, 600 a bedroom. Now I'm going down to 500 to get it done. And so that's a significant drop. We're seeing 15 and 20% drops in rent, not across the board, not on average, but like where I could really reach for that top rent, I might have to pull back a bit. And thankfully, I ran my numbers at like 500 a bedroom when I bought the property, or sometimes some of the properties I bought a couple of years ago. And so I ran it at like 400 a bedroom, right? But, you know, it's one of those things where I can imagine people buying right now just before COVID or during COVID and expecting current rents on the property to be the same in September. And I think we're going to see a bit of a pullback there. And it's actually scary because London has 100,000 students. A quarter of our population is Western, like Westervelt, Fanshawe, like student in some way. And there's a trend towards going online. If Fanshawe can pull off in September full online classes successfully, that has implications, right? If Western can pull off for the arts, you know, they're talking about half online, half in person. They're not 100% sure yet. But if they can execute successfully online, enrollment numbers in person are going to drop big time. And so we're going to have thousands of bedrooms in London, Ontario that are going to come available, hundreds of units. They're going to flood the market. And we have no immigration right now in London, very little. So that's something to think about when you look at demographic trends, when you look at, and that's important to investing in real estate long-term, is like, hey, how desirable is my rental property going to be? And it's possible that with all this commercial being repurposed to residential, we may have more inventory available on the market for tenants than we've, you know, had in like 5 or 10 years. And so it might go back to 2012, where I remember having to grind, reposting my ads daily, doing showings like 10, 15 times before I found the right tenant. But like, that's what it's like. Again, it's coming back to that. I'm feeling like the people I'm talking to in the market, that's what they're seeing. That's what the property managers are seeing right now. Is there's a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of terrible tenants, but it's really hard to find a good tenant right now. And so that's something to be cognizant of when you're running your numbers is, hey, past data isn't going to be as useful right now as it was previously. So past rental, you know, projections for rent growth, or past numbers for what you're getting in rent on a unit you're buying. So those are all things to think about. And I think from a rental perspective, I didn't think rents would ever drop, but I could imagine London, Ontario losing 25% of its tenant population because students are mostly tenants. That has big ramifications for landlords. There's going to be a lot of available inventory on the market that we need to now fill with bodies.
Yeah, it certainly is unprecedented times. Appreciate you sharing that perspective. Circling back or looping back to buying properties during COVID, are there any other implications or changes to your business model? So, for example, for me, we're often looking at value add properties, right? And oftentimes part of that value add process is tenant turnover. And as you mentioned, the LTB, RTA, it's not as enforceable as it once was. And we really don't know when we're going to see that return to normal. So for myself, one of the things that we've really changed towards our business model is if the value add was dependent upon tenant turnover, we're really now starting to try and make that the seller's problem. So we'll just make it conditional upon vacant possession. And if not, we just kind of consider it a bad deal and we'll move on. Or if we can identify that there's very problem tenants existing in the property already, if we can't get vacant possession, we'll just move on and consider it a bad deal almost regardless of price. Just because to me, when I'm going to be able to evict a bad or problem tenant, I don't know. So I'd love to get your perspective on that. And are there any other things that have changed about your buying process?
Yeah, in general, the last 2 years, I felt like there was a trend towards the landlord-tenant board leaning towards tenant favoritism. And I don't want to say that so for a long time, I agree with the sentiment you said. For the last year, I've been avoiding buying properties, or I guess at least the last 8 months, I've been avoiding buying properties with tenants in them at all. Vacant possession has been one of the number one factors. It's disappointing. I have some joint venture partnerships where we bought properties where there was tenants in the building, and I was like, we can get them out, we'll pay them out. And these tenants, they're just not leaving. And I feel really bad because we want to get in there and transform the place, but the price that one of the tenants wanted is $25,000. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's just not enough profit there to do that. So it's one of those things where, if you can avoid buying a property, I mean, almost in general, I agree with you. I think that buying a property with bad tenants in it almost feels like it is in LA. In LA, you have properties that will sell for half price because a bad tenant is in there, and they got you can basically pass the tenancy on to your kids. And the building's literally not it's a bad tenant can make a property worth nothing or very little, right? So I think that's true here, or becoming more so true here.
Well, and in part because of that as well, I know our buddy Graham Stephan, he's tried sometimes to do cash for keys at prices that would literally make our jaws drop. I can remember, and this would be 2+ years ago, him talking about offering someone $30,000 US cash for keys, and she just flatly said no. And just to be like, okay, well, I guess it's your house now, essentially. Let me know when you die, and hopefully I get my house back. It's just it's really interesting. And I think in the short term, we may find ourselves there as landlords. And so definitely making sure you've got those relationships and that understanding is so critical. We've touched upon student rentals. You kind of alluded to commercial real estate. Are there any categories of properties that currently you consider untouchable that wouldn't have been the case pre-COVID?
Untouchable in the sense that in a bad way, right? You wouldn't.
As in you just wouldn't buy it, under no circumstances, almost regardless of, the price drop. It's dropped 25% versus what it would have been pre-COVID. I'd just love to hear any perspective there. Is commercial and untouchable niche for you, or is it just a matter of making sure the numbers work differently than pre-COVID?
I've never been a big retail commercial real estate investor to begin with. So strip malls or things like that. They're obviously a lot worse now when there's a lot of more vacancy than there's ever been. There's a huge trend of people are working from home and selling online.
Yeah.
Geez, I actually didn't need that retail. And COVID was a testing ground that proved that, hey, we actually didn't need the office. We're functioning just fine without it. Let's save ourselves $5,000 a month in rent. And so landlords are geez, or commercial landlords, I think, in that space are geez, we don't know if we're going to collect. We don't know what's long-term, if there's going to be any tenants at all. So vacancy rates are super high. London, as an example, where we live, it has some of the highest amount of square footage available. And so that's a huge problem. We have a lot of commercial office space in London per square foot of what we offer. London is one of the top in Canada. And so we have a lot of that space that's going to need to be repurposed. And so I wouldn't say it's untouchable, because at the right price, anything can be taken down. At current values, or what people are currently willing to sell or landlords are currently willing to sell their property at in that space, I have no interest at all. Until there's been a point where there's a reality check and prices have dropped, there's no desire. But I suppose you can imagine some sort of like motel owner or something, or some commercial retail office place that has no rent coming in and like a $10,000 mortgage. They might be incentivized to dump the property at quite a discount. So I wouldn't say, I would avoid it completely. It's just, you have to really make sure that the numbers make sense. And in a lot of cases, that means discounting cash flow significantly with really high vacancy rates and things like that.
And so how would you go about negotiating on some of those more problem properties or properties that are really going to struggle? I know through happenstance and partially dumb luck, we were originally very close to buying a motel, a 32-room motel right before COVID. And for a multitude of reasons, one being mild concern before the lockdown, we decided to let the conditions expire and not waive them and move forward. With hindsight, thank God. But, maybe you were looking at buying a motel before COVID-19 and you're thinking, well, I don't know, 2-3 years from now, things may not be that bad. How would you approach that negotiation? Are you asking for a massive price discount? Are you asking for really unique creative financing with maybe no payments or extremely low payments? How would you go about trying to structure that deal to minimize your risk while still getting the deal?
It's a good question. It depends on a lot of factors, I suppose. Like, what are you looking for out of a deal, right? If you're an investor watching this that has a pile of cash, you might not be as interested as in a no cash deal, right? You're like, hey, I have cash, or I have access to cash. So that might be something not as attractive for you. But then again, like, it just depends on your goals and what you feel like long-term makes a lot of sense for your strategy. So if you believe that 2-3 years from now, which I do believe, things will come back, not the same as they were, but in a stronger way than they are today. So you might believe in that strategy and say, hey, I believe in this building 2-3 years from now. But to get to that point, you have to say in the next year, it might get worse. And so could the building be worth even 10% less than it is today? So making sure that you have that discount baked in today for that level of uncertainty, right? Because these are uncertain times. Uncertain times carry more risk. And with more risk, we need to have more reward. So you go to the seller and you might work to their, weak spot. So where are they hurting the most? Where's their pain point? And trying to solve their pain point would give you a bit of leverage into getting whatever you want out of the property. So maybe it's price, and maybe for the owner, they just want to get some cash out. They want to stop the bleeding. So maybe you take the property over and you come up with some creative financing term where there's a couple of mortgages on it, and they're getting cash flow now. Their equity is now being put to work and giving them cash flow every month, and they don't have any risk associated with paying the mortgage anymore. You're taking that on for them. And if you assume all that and start operating the property, and you're like, hey, I'm going to take a loss for the next year, and I'm going to grind my butt off just to get break-even cash flow for the next year or two. I want $200,000 off the purchase price, or 10% off the purchase price, or whatever it is, to justify that happening. The other way too is like you can play with it the other way. You can give them the purchase price that they want, but then say, hey, look, I need like 3% interest rate on the debt that you're going to now fund on this entire deal, and I need to be into the deal for 5% or something like that, right? And figure out a creative structure that works for your terms, right? And so there's lots of cool things you can do. I've seen people, even work out deals where the landlord rented the unit, with one of the units that was vacant for like a year. It's like, hey, guarantee me a certain amount of rent for this hotel, and now I'm interested again. And the vendor's like, you know what? I could throw $200,000 rent towards it if you give me the price that I want on my building. And so maybe now you've got the cash flow for the next year to ride out till Airbnb picks up, and now the hotel deal makes sense because they're willing to throw you guaranteed rent for the next year while you fix the building up. And so that'd be a win scenario. And they're like, hey, I had this whatever price it is, say it's $3 million. I have $3 million, like I'm stuck on that price. As a vendor, I'm not going to drop below that. It's like, okay, no one else is going to give you $3 million, but I'll give you $3 million. And here's what I need you to do for me. I need you to rent all these hotel rooms for the next year while I renovate them, and pay me rent the whole time at a certain amount. And they might be like, geez, I got $1 million equity in this property. For me to pay $100,000 to you over the next year, that's nothing. I'd be happy to do that. And so that's where you can get really creative. And now you can go to the bank and say, hey, I got these leased out for a year. Cash flow, guaranteed. The bank's like, oh, during these uncertain times, you have every single unit rented out. Now that's a creative solution where the bank's willing to now give you financing. The vendor got the price they wanted. Everything kind of works out in a good way for everyone. And so that's where you can get creative. You just got to think through like, what metrics do I need to get this deal done? Or do I need a vendor take back? Do I need them to rent the units out for me and give me cash flow? what do I need here to make the deal work? And so you just kind of run through different scenarios. And if you get creative with it, you say, here's my problem. Here's their problem. Let's bridge that gap somehow.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And I think a few other like creative terms that we'll see become very common in a lot of larger purchases where we're dealing with a fellow investor who really understands what we're trying to accomplish as real estate investors. I know on a recent deal, we just negotiated, I think, a 5-year VTB where half the interest is a balloon payment at the end of the loan timeline or at the end of the term. I think what's really important for us as investors, if we're looking to buy properties from fellow investors, is understanding that during uncertain times, its creativity becomes so much more valuable, right? Creativity was always important in your deal structure, but it's absolutely critical, in my opinion, today to minimize your risk because there's only certain levers we can pull. And there's a lot of other risk factors that we can't control. Can't control when the LTB reopens. We can't control when we can start evicting bad tenants. Before we wrap up this segment, Mike, any other last minute tips that you'd want to share with the audience in regards to, if they're looking to buy a property during COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, reach out to, I think the best way to find property during COVID-19 is to find private landlords. In my opinion, that's the best way because you can work with them and find creative solutions. As an example, like I'm looking to sell some of my properties off too. I've actually been selling during COVID. My land development, you remember the subdivision, I sold half of it off already to someone. I'm looking to sell the rest of it to a builder because I don't want to take that risk on right now. And so there are opportunities where we can look as investors into our portfolio and say, hey, these 5 properties here, I can't refinance them for whatever reason. I got lots of equity. Time to dump those and then work with new deals where I can be zero down. So that's what I've been doing is rebalancing my portfolio. So for the people watching, if you want to pick up a deal or two, I have a few joint venture partnerships where the partner and I want to get out because we have equity trapped in it. We can't get it out or for whatever reason. And there's flexibility there, right? So that's something to think about is find landlords in the network that you want to talk to. Talk to real estate agents too, because they obviously are on the ground, right now, living it and breathing it. And go talk to like 5 different agents and get their perspective and get their opinion. So let them know, hey, I have cash or, I have ability to finance right now. If you come across a desperate seller, call me. And so that would be a worthwhile pursuit. I think if you're trying to take down real estate right now is reach out to like 100 realtors in London. There's like 100 decent, there's probably more than 100 decent realtors, but I know of like around 50 to 100 like producing agents that all probably have access to like at least 2 deals if they were really like think of like people they know. And so if you push them to think, I know myself as a realtor, if someone were to ask me like, do you have a property? I might just say no. But if they were to target me and say, hey, do you have like a duplex right near Fanshawe? I'd be like, oh, actually, I know a guy who has a duplex near Fanshawe. And he said last year he wanted to sell it. And like, I know of that, but if you don't ask the right targeted question, I'm not going to be able to bring it to recollection. So being super specific with the types of questions that you ask will get you a lot more than just calling an agent and saying, hey, do you have anything for sale at the deal? They're going to say no, right? But if you were to like dig in and have a conversation with them about what you're exactly looking for, being more precise will get you a better result. And so that's what I'd recommend during this time is run your numbers, be damn sure you're going to have cash flow. Be sure that if we go into a recession, have a 10% pullback, that we're going to have, a situation where you're not going to be underwater. The banks, like CMHC, even has all the data in the world, and they're saying now from 5% down to 10% down. A lot of the banks are forecasting 10% drops in real estate. I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a bit of a heat before there's a drop, but it's possible that we do have a pullback. And so are you prepared to buy a $500,000 property that might be worth $450,000 2 years from now? And if you have cash flow, the answer is 10 years from now, it's going to be worth $550,000, so I don't care. That's sort of like my idea going into real estate. And even if I don't have a lot of cash flow, if I can get into it for zero down, I'm like, geez, in 10 years, I'll have all that appreciation. And so if I can be like cash flow neutral, for me, that's a win. I guess I'm in a state where I don't need cash flow. So that's a different type of strategy, but maybe you are too. Maybe someone watching this has a great job that they love, and they're just trying to build wealth through real estate. There are deals that you could set up where you could creatively have a neutral cash flow position and now own a huge asset that could appreciate over time. So I'm not recommending the speculation approach, but I am saying that like if you can find a deal maybe it doesn't cash flow that well, it has a lot of value add, like almost like a bird, or has a lot of upside and gentrification potential, and you can get into it without any of your own money. That's a huge win right now.
Yeah, that's some amazing advice. Thanks so much, Mike. If people want to follow along with you on your journey or get in contact, what's the best way?
So the best way is on YouTube or Instagram, at Mike Rosehart. You probably have my name down here, so it's easy.
Yeah,
You can find it.
we'll
It's
throw it in the
in
video description.
YouTube, and you'll find it there too.
Awesome. Thanks again, Mike.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Mike for taking the time to shoot this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel, and make sure you go and follow along with Mike Rosehart on his journey. We'll throw a link in the video description down below. Otherwise, I'd love to hear from you. What other videos and what other topics should Mike and myself discuss? Would you like to see us return to deal analysis with Smash or Pass? Would you like us to talk more about the financial independence, retire early community? Or what do you want me and Mike to talk about? It's been really fun over the years making videos with Mike, but now we need your feedback. So let me know in the comment section what you want to see on the next Mike and Matt on Fire or on Real Estate. Thanks, guys.